In this lesson, we're going to make a trigger box. And this is going to be the parent to a couple of other blueprints that you can make. If you want to make a door or a lift, you'll use the trigger box as the parent. And I'll go over that later. Right now, we're going to, in a blank space, right click, new folder, blueprints. And let's go in there. And we can create 2 more folders in here. Interfaces, and then interactives, or interactables if you want. So we're going to start with this interactables. This is where we're going to actually build the blueprint. The interface folder will be to do the blueprint interface, which is separate. So in the blank space, right click, you have blueprint class up here, and you also have blueprints down here. So you can select blueprint class right here. And then when we go to do the interface will only be down here for the blueprint. But so we want blueprints, blueprint class. It's going to ask you what you want your parent class to be. We're going to choose actor. If you hover over it, it'll show you a bunch of other information if you need it. Hit actor, and we're going to call this BP underscore trigger box. You want your blueprints to have the prefix of BP, because then when we're searching for them over here, they'll be easier to find because we'll know it starts with a BP. You can pull it right into your level just to see. It won't actually do anything because we haven't made anything, but you can see it's up here, BP. So whenever you're searching up here, if you're looking specifically for blueprints, then search for BP, and anything that you've made a blueprint of will show up immediately. So it's just easier for filing and when you're actually looking for things. And if you're looking to call them from another blueprint, it might be easier to have them labeled that way. So we're going to double click here, and it'll bring us into this screen. We have our viewport, construction script, and event graph. Right now we're going to do the viewport. Since we don't have anything here, just this default scene root, which is nothing. This guy is just a placeholder. It's just to show you. Let me undock. If you want, you can undock your tab and then put it next to your other one, so you don't have 2 windows. You can just go back and forth between the tabs. But as you notice, there's nothing there. We haven't added anything yet. And if you hit play, it won't even show up in your level. So it's only an editing tool. And it's just to show you that, hey, this is where this blueprint's located inside your map. So we're going to add a collision box to it, or a box collision, as this refers to it. You can just search up here, though. So if you don't have to remember box, you just remember collision, because you want the player or something to interact with this, so it needs to hit this collision box. And you can choose a sphere or a capsule. Sorry. So you can choose a box, a capsule, or a sphere. Capsule would be like for the character. This is a capsule, like a pill capsule. And then you have a sphere that you can use as well. It just depends on what you want to use it for. So that's a personal choice. The character one, though, of course, you're going to want it to be in that capsule because it's going to envelop that whole character. Won't be too awkward for you. I'm going to rename this, though. I'm just going to name it Trigger. You're going to want to rename these to something that you're going to remember, because if everything is named box, then you're going to have multiple things named box when you're trying to call them. But you'll notice that once I start changing it, it automatically put it in there. So right now we just want a trigger box. And you can determine what size you want it, now or later. It's up to you. You can go over to the scale. We can just scale this up. I'll make it 5. And then depending on where your object's actually going to be, you can move this up or down, and it will correlate with this location over here. So if you want the collision box to start above the ball or right on the ball, you can do that. And you can just uncheck that, our little snap, and then you can move it freely. I'm just going to leave it how it is though for now. So now let's go into the event graph. Actually, I'm sorry. Yeah, let's go in the event graph. So for now, we're going to use the trigger that we have over here. We can erase this stuff. Click on the trigger. In this details panel on the right hand side, we want to select on component begin overlap for this first portion. So as soon as I hit that plus sign, it'll automatically put it in there like it did, and then it'll say view, and it'll take you straight to it if you were somewhere off on the screen and you need to look at it. Now we're going to create a branch. You can do it two ways. You can search for it, or you can hold down the B button on your keyboard, left click, and it'll automatically appear. Now we're going to connect the overlap to the branch. So this top, you can see how these have the same node here, or the same structure that it looks like. So these will connect. If you try to connect something that doesn't connect, it'll give you an error message like it does right there. Now we have something called a condition. Branches have a condition, which means that it's true or false. So we can pull something off of here if we want. And then you could promote to a variable if you want. What we're going to do first is we're going to get player pawn. We're going to bring that in. And then we're going to pull this out, and we're going to do an equal sign, equal object. Actually, what I'm going to do is I'll put it in this bottom one. And then we're going to connect the other actor to that one. And if you notice, you have these two blue nodes, and this one already has a red node. So that'll connect right into our condition. So the red will go into the red, blues can go into blues, greens can go into greens, stuff like that. But we don't want to connect that. So we want it to look just like this. So we're saying when something overlaps this trigger, we're going to ask a question. The question is it the player? So does the actor equal the player? The actor is whatever enters the trigger. If it equals the player, we're going to go to true. If it's not the player, it's false and it won't do anything. Before we can do that, we're going to create what's called a blueprint interface. Right click, blueprints, blueprint interface. We're going to start with a BPI for our prefix. So when we search for it, if you're searching up here for BPIs, it won't show up in this world outliner, but if you're searching BPI filters, then it'll show up under this search bar. So we're going to name that one BPI player. Use an underscore to separate words. You can't use a space. It'll give you an error message. Name may not contain the following characters. And then just hit enter. And then double click to open that up. Now we're going to create two functions. So it'll automatically give you a default function. We're going to name one of these register interaction. You can make it all one word. It'll automatically separate them. If you use I believe if you use a lowercase followed by an uppercase, it'll automatically separate them there, but that's fine. And then go to add new, this green button right here, and we're going to add another function. Call that one unregister interaction. Now the unregister one we don't have to do anything to because it's once something unregisters, it says, okay, it's done, finish it. The register one, though, we need to tell it what needs to register. So I'm going to go down to this inputs. I hit that plus sign, and it brought up this. So inputs, hit that plus sign. Now over here we have this Boolean. Well, we want it to interact with the player. So we're going to do actor. The one that you want, or that we want, that we're going to look for is this actor. Actor object reference. This one right here under object types. Because as soon as you type in actor, it'll bring up anything that has actor written in it. It even brings up factory because the word actor is in factory. But we want actor object reference. Now this, where it says new param, we can name that whatever we like. We're going to name it interactable. It's always good to name things something that makes sense to what it's going to be doing. And so what this is saying is the actor is what's going to be interactable when this register interaction happens. Compile, save, and then you can click out of that. So we're going to take this branch, pull a node out from true, and type in register interaction, which is what we just created in that BPI. So that's going to help us communicate between blueprints, which is that BPI, that blueprint interface. So it'll say right under here, target is BPI player, the one that we just created. We're going to, the target, right here in this blue, we are actually going to connect that on the component overlap. And then we're going to do interactable, pull a pin off that, and then type in self. If you just type in self, it'll always bring up this get a reference to self. So it's self is your character. And that's just automatically in there. You don't have to do anything else to create this self. It'll as soon as you type in self, it'll always be there. Scoot over a little bit. If you want to create something in between, we can into another branch, but we're not going to do that this time. We're just going to create the trigger box. So right now, we're going to have to create two functions. Hit functions over here. Hit plus. We're going to call one of them trigger activated. And the other one's going to be trigger deactivated. So make trigger activated and create another one. Trigger deactivated. Now go back up to the trigger activated one. Give you all your options up here, but we don't need it for right now. What we're going to do is go back to the event graph. Well, compile first, save. Go back to the event graph. We're going to pull out this trigger activated. And it's going to give us this automatic box, and this is the function here. And then we're just going to connect these two nodes. And now what we're going to do is create two more variables. One is going to be activate targets. We're going to go up here after we create it, and we're going to change this to an array. Okay. Sorry, we do have to do one more thing to this trigger activated. For this trigger activated, we're going to add an input over here, and we're going to do the same thing. We're going to add actor, object reference, and let's change this to player. And then that's going to give us this node down here, which we need so we can take this other actor from the component overlap, put that into player. Next, we're going to connect this trigger activated to a for each loop. This first one right here. Let's bring that in. Then we can pull this activate targets out, get activate targets, and then plug that into the array right there. All right, now once we have that, we're going to come down here and we're going to create what's called an event dispatcher. Just hit the plus sign here. This one that says event dispatcher, it'll change when you hover over it. Name it on activated. Hit enter. Then we're going to pull that into the graph. And we're going to call it. And then you're going to hook up the for each completed part to the call on activated. So if you didn't catch that, pull the on activated out there, and then we're going to call. These do different things. This is going to call. Something else will bind. For now, just worry about the call. Now we're going to create a node off this called isValid. So just type in isValid. Should have a question mark next to it. Pull that in. Sorry. So we're looking at this active targets, but what I need to do is I have the active targets there, so the array element is going to go straight into this input object. Now, compile that, save it, and then we're going to go back into the Blueprints interface folder, and we're going to create a new Blueprint interface. So remember, right-click, Blueprints, Blueprint interface, and then hit select. We're going to rename this one. Again, it's going to be BPI underscore. This one is going to be interactive. Double click to open it up. We're going to create functions, 2 of them. One's going to be activate. The other one up here, add new, select function, deactivate. Hit compile. Let's make sure we have our inputs down here. New parameter. We're going to do actor again. We're going to call this one interactor. So compile and save that. Deactivate, we're going to do nothing. Let's go back to our trigger box. We're going to take this isValid. And then we're going to connect that to the blueprint interface. Type in activate. And we want the blueprint interface. So we want activate, the message. Don't confuse it with trigger activated. That's a function. We want the interactive here. So that's going to go right there. Now that first portion is done. So what we can do now, good idea to keep everything together. Anywhere, as long as it's going to go over everything. Hit the left mouse button and then drag and make a box that goes over the entire piece that we just made. So they're all highlighted now. So if you notice that, like if I click off, they're not highlighted. I can click one at a time. I can click two at a time. Or I can drag this box and select them all. And then hit the C button on your keyboard and allow you to put things in a box and make a comment. So for this one, we can put trigger activated. And what's nice about this too is then you can move this as a whole if it's in that box. If it's not in the box, it's going to not move it. So once you put it in the box though, it becomes a part of it. So this is a good way of organizing. So next what we're going to do is the deactivate part. We'll go to trigger again. And this time we're going to go to on component end overlap. So it'll bring that down right there. So this one will be a little bit shorter. We're going to get our branch. We're going to get our player pawn. Let's give ourselves some space. Do our equal sign, equal object. It's that first one. Connect the red into the red. I'm going to switch these just because of how it looks. I don't want them crossing like that. A little tip though, if you you start getting a lot of stuff, like this is confusing where it's going, you can double click on the line. So it highlights the line when you hover over it. And you can double click and it'll give you a little like point in that node, and then you can pull that. So if you want to organize it, you can see it a little better. You can see how it flows better. So that's always an option. So we got the get player pawn. Now we need the branch. We're going to take true. And we're going to look for that unregister that we created. Unregister interaction. Put that right there. Then we're going to grab our function. Trigger deactivated. Connect those two. We're going to do our for each loop again. And this time we need to hook up the deactivate targets. So I need to create another variable since I didn't have it there. So I'm going to go deactivate. And if you notice, it's already an array because the last one I made is an array. So it's going to pretty much duplicate whatever variable you made last, and it's already got our actor type up here. Let's pull this out. We're going to hook that up to the array. So remember, it's an array. That little box up here, like 9 squares, that represents an array. An array allows you to get a large group of actors. So anything that has this deactivate targets, it doesn't matter which actor it is, it will respond to that. So if you need to send a message out to multiple things, you can use arrays to help identify it. So we got that attached. Now we need to take this loop body on the for each loop, connect that. We're going to do another is valid with the question mark. And then let's hook up that array element to the input object like we did last time. And then we're going to connect this is valid to the deactivate. And when I mean deactivate, we want to go deactivate, and then we want this BPI message again, this interactive message. That's going to send out the message just like this one. But this is going to tell it, okay, shut it down. So now we have that. Hit compile, save. It's going to say error. The error here, deactivate. If you come down here, it must have a valid target or reference to self. So since we got the error and it says, you know, it needs a reference to self, we're going to take this target and we're going to hook it up to this array element. And if you want to double click, separate that. We're going to do the same thing over here. Compile, and our errors go away. We still have another error though. Unregistered interaction must have a valid target to reference. So I have to hook up this target, and I'm going to hook that up to other actor. And now we're all good. So now we've got our trigger box. So that's all set, but it's not actually interacting with anything yet. We have it talking to the player, but the player needs to know what's going on. They need to communicate between each other. So we're going to go back in our first person example map. Make sure you've compiled and saved it. Go to first person example, and then find your character. You can find him in the map if you want. Just click on the character if he's already in there, or you can search first person character. You can search for it down here too if you wanted to. You could type in character, and then it'll be one of the first person character right there. If yours is third person, yeah, no worries, it's the same thing. So now we're just going to do something really quick. We're going to create two variables down here. One we'll name null. The other one we're going to name current interactable. We're going to make both of these actors. Get your object reference. We'll do actor again. All right. Now, right click an empty spot and go to event register. That's not the one I want. Right click, register interaction. Then we are going to, excuse me, pull in this current interactable, go to set, I'm going to connect that. Nope, that's not it. What's going on here? Okay. So there's one thing we need to do before we can actually bring in this BPI player, register interaction and unregister, in our first person character. Yours might say class defaults with your details panel over here. Click on class settings. We need to add that interface. So it says interfaces here, implemented interface, no interface, add. And this is where that BPI comes in handy, your naming conventions. And this one we're going to hook up to the player because that's the one that has the register, interaction, and unregister, which we need. Let's hit compile. So once we have that BPI player in there, we should be able to call it event, and then you want that register interaction. You could also just do register, and then you'll have to find it though. And so you want to make sure it's this event one. You have all these different ones now because we created a function that has register. We created the BPI player interface call, but we want the event. So this register interaction, it's mailing that message to this event. We're going to take our current interactable, pull it out here, click on set this time, S-E-T, the second one. And we're going to just hook these two up. And then we're going to do unregister. Pull that one out. And then this time pull out your null. Null just means, and we're going to do set. Null just means that that's the end of the chain. After that, it's done. And you'll see that in a couple other programs. Specifically, Houdini uses the word null a lot. So, and then just hit compile, save. Okay, so we have the first person character there. One thing you can do then is you can comment this out if you want. Then you can go register, unregister, whatever you like. Just that way it's set in a group. Compile, save. Go back to the trigger box. We're going to do a comment here too. So highlight everything, hit C, and this will be trigger deactivated. This helps too, so if somebody else ends up looking at your blueprints and is trying to work on a project maybe that you had started on, or try to maybe add something to something that you already worked on, having these labels will let them know exactly what this is supposed to do. And then if there's a issue maybe that they find, they'll know where to go. Alright, so that is the video for this trigger box. And then in the next video we will make a platform of some sort.